En af de radioaktive og lytter til T-Radioen. Vores værter står klar til at give dig en smagsprøve på deres programmer og glæder sig til at møde dig. Vil du ikke gå glip af, når vi er live, så skynd dig at trykke på hjertet, så du følger vores side. Slå røven i sædet og giv en varm velkomst til vores næste program.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Noise Complaint.
My name's Nelson.
I'm Bella.
We also obviously in the studio have a guest.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Anne.
It's our first guest, so we're very excited.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
So today's episode is going to be a little bit different than last week's because last week was more of an introduction, and today we have our first actual topic that we spent time researching.
This week we're going to be talking about kind of accessible sounds, more specifically about the experience of visually impaired individuals in cities as they navigate sort of the sonic landscape, and we have a fair amount of music as well to get into, a lot less rain recordings than we had last week, which is nice.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to really find visually impaired people who wanted to be interviewed, but we kind of did our best version of that, and we blindfolded our friends and each other and walked across some scary, busy intersections. So that's also coming up.
Yeah, so the outline of today's show, the first half is going to be a bit more content focused. Bella's done a lot of research, so she'll be talking at length about different challenges of designing cities for visually impaired individuals, and also some technologies, solutions. And then the second half will be that sort of blindfolding pseudo-scientific experiment that we did. We'll have Anne talk a bit about how it felt like to be blindfolded crossing a big street in Copenhagen.
And then interspersed in between, Nelson's done some research about music created by visually impaired people, and how that process is. Nelson will be talking about.
But thanks again for tuning in. It's easy to comment if you make an account on Twitch and sign in.
Yeah, we love comments.
We love feedback. We love wardrobe observations. Anything you want. But yeah, I think we should just get into it.
All right. Okay. So, like we mentioned last week, sight and visuals really are what people normally prioritize when thinking about cities, or, how we understand cities. And kind of what we want to do with this radio show is look at other senses, such as like listening or hearing, and sound that you can use to understand a city. And for us, it's kind of like, maybe a fun experiment using a different sense or using sound to understand a city. But, for other people, like visually impaired people, it's not a choice. Like, it's their reality, and it's not just a fun way to understand things. So it's important to look at it from that perspective as well. So with that, urban planners and architects, at least based on like what we've been studying in school, have always usually been seeing people. Like, I don't think any of the architects or urban planners we've learned about have been visually impaired. And so when they're designing, they're not really prioritizing accessibility for people who can't see. Usually, like, visually impaired people are an afterthought or an accommodation after the building or city has already been designed. And accessibility features are an add-on. And that makes it a lot more difficult because the space itself isn't designed for those people. And so visually impaired people's paths throughout the city have like so many more obstacles than seeing people even realize, like bushes that might be like lower down to the ground that we easily walk around. Visually impaired people don't notice, and it can scratch them, or, little things like that. So I wanted to talk about, so there's this woman, Claudia Folksa, in Denver, Colorado, and she works for the regional transportation department in that city, and she's visually impaired herself. And so she did her master's thesis on how blind people use how they navigate the city, and she had them draw mental maps, which we're familiar with from our program. And so these mental maps of their commutes, she realized they're the same and pretty similar paths that seeing people take, although there were so many obstacles. And I think a lot of people might think that visually impaired people are using easier ways to get to places, or they have their own routes mapped out and things like that. But she said there's really isn't that big of a difference. The difference was that it takes them much longer because there are so many obstacles. Yeah. And then let's see. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a bit, or Bella's going to talk a bit about some of the technology that has been developed to maybe provide some solutions to these problems that she started to talk about. But first, we're going to do a bit of a music break, let's say. So obviously, there is a historic connection between blind individuals and music. Goes back all the way back even to Homer, the blind bard, although some people dispute whether he was actually blind. But visually impaired communities around the world have been changing music from the Kobzars of Ukraine to the harpists of Ireland. I don't know if Bella's Irish, so maybe she's played the harp before.
I have not.
Okay, Louis Braille, the man who invented the system of reading and writing that so many people use today, he also was an accomplished pianist and organist, and he even developed a sheet music system for blind people as well, which is still used today. But I'm going to focus right now on the 1920s, more specifically on Chicago, which during the 1920s, as we've studied, was a booming city. It was sort of one of the first metropolises of the world, had one of the first skyscrapers. The Urban School of Chicago is something where we were hit on the head with many times in our first semester. So Chicago, 1920s, there's a woman named Arizona Drains who is brought to Chicago up from Texas. She's brought there by a record label in order to record an album. And Drains was a blind African-American woman from Texas. She spent a lot of time growing up in church and developed a new form of gospel music, let's say. So basically before Arizona Drains, most of American gospel music relied just on a cappella, so performing without instruments, without piano. But Drains was an amazing pianist. She just had total mastery of the instrument. And she combined her singing, her really gritty, powerful voice, with this ragtime, or what was called barrel house style of piano playing. And in combining those two things brought a new energy to the gospel scene in the States. One writer that I read sort of compared hearing Arizona Drains for the first time to hearing Jimi Hendrix for the first time. So you'll hear for yourself what you think, because I'm going to play a song of hers, but try to get in the headspace of back then in the 20s. This is groundbreaking because it's combining this really crazy piano, eccentric piano, with her voice. So unfortunately, there's not a lot known about her life, and I didn't know her name. I don't think many people would recognize her name, but it's clear that this visually impaired woman paved the way for some of the most famous singers in gospel and soul history. So she sort of laid this creative foundation for the likes of Ray Charles and Fats Domino, two individuals who were kind of pioneers for the R&B and rock and roll music scenes. So I'm going to play a song of hers from the 1920s. Again, try to listen for the foundations of more recent songs or types of song you're familiar with, more specifically this combination between piano playing and soulful singing. So right now we have Lamb's Blood Has Washed Me Clean, sung by Arizona Drains. All right, we're back. Welcome back to Noise Complaint. Hopefully I've switched mics. Hopefully that you can hear me better now. We're having some trouble there. Yeah.
All right, so back to talking about visually impaired people's navigation of the city. So there nowadays is more technology to guide people through the city, but this technology is focusing on more than just the obstacles that we were talking about earlier. It's about enriching visually impaired people's perception of the landscape and the soundscape. So getting from place A to place B isn't about just avoiding obstacles. For us seeing people, it's also interesting to look around and see what stores are around you, or what people, sightseeing, people watching, things like that. And that is something that visually impaired people are missing. So for an example, Microsoft has launched this app called Soundscape. And what it basically is doing is enriching the soundscape for visually impaired people. So it's not just telling someone when to turn left or right. It's telling people what stores they might be interested that are coming up on their left or right, or telling them about landmarks in the surrounding area. So, and the users can actually add like what they're interested in and things like that. So then in the future, the app will know what to alert them about. So it's kind of creating a more holistic landscape using sound, which I think is really important because, technology and aids for visually impaired people should be about more than just efficiency. It should be about enjoyment and like quality of life. And I think enhancing the urban soundscape is part of that. So the Soundscape app from Microsoft is an example of a private solution to this issue. But I think, ideologically, I think that this is a public issue and it shouldn't just be up to private companies for coming up with easier solutions for visually impaired people to navigate cities. So an example of a publicly funded solution is, so in Warsaw, Poland, there is this beacon program that's a little similar to the Microsoft Beacon app, like Soundscape app, but basically bus stops, publicly, so public municipal buildings and similar places like that have beacons that if a user has the app that matches the beacon, then their app is alerted when they approach it. So if they're going to a bus stop, their app is alerted what time the bus is coming, when it's arriving, and then the bus driver also gets an alert if there's a user of the app program waiting outside. So then both parties kind of understand what's going on. And then also, so I don't know, for example, we had to get our CPR numbers here in Denmark. And in order to do that, you get a number. And then the number is on the screen, but that's really a visual cue that's not helping anyone who's visually impaired. So this program in Warsaw, if you have this app, there's a beacon in the municipal office. So if you have a number, it will read it out loud to you on your phone if it's being called on the screen or things like that. So it's really enhancing the urban experience that even bureaucratic stuff we take for granted that we may think is annoying is so much more difficult for people who are not seeing. And the EU is actually now helping to fund this program to scale it up. So I believe it'll probably start being used in more cities.
Nice. Shout out to all the students who had to go through the CPR process and wait 3 hours in line. There's definitely a need for this, and even a market for these public and private initiatives. There's some 285 million individuals who have visual impairments around the world today. And we're going to shift again right back to music. So I just earlier was talking about Arizona Drains and how she changed the gospel music scene in the 1920s. But 30 years later, a man from Albany, Georgia, who had lost his vision as a child, would also change the global music scene. He synthesized gospel, blues, jazz, pop, and country styles, and you know him well. His name was Ray Charles, and his hit songs from the 1960s brought both widespread fame and a new genre completely with soul music. And one of Ray Charles's many contributions to music was that he secularized a lot of gospel music sounds. So he basically brought the intense vocal lyricism and passion that you heard in Arizona Drains out of the church and into the city. And for the purposes of our show, of Noise Complaint, it's worth noting that while Ray Charles was not necessarily an urban or universally urban musician, his sounds often captured a particularly urban mood and feeling. One important characteristic of cities is that they combine different styles, ideas, and people. And this urban synthesis runs throughout the music of Ray Charles. So we'll play one of his songs just as an example. And if you want, try to listen for the combination of gospel roots and jazz swing, but also this totally secular, non-religious, sensual message that definitely would have created a buzz in 1954 when this song came out. So,
and if you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments.
And like the page. It's a great page. All right, here's Ray Charles with I've Got a Woman. Shout out to Rip City DL8. Ross, Anne's partner, let's say.
Hi,
Ross. He correctly caught that that last song, I've Got a Woman, from Ray Charles, is sampled in Kanye West's Gold Digger, which, again, I think speaks to the legacy of Ray Charles in all types of music. All right, now we're going to go to something completely different.
Yeah.
Crosswalks.
So, crosswalks are
Also known as zebra crossings, lots of different
I guess there's a
terms.
lot of
when you
different
cross
terms.
a street, it's the place where you go.
Yeah, like in one of our classes, there was kind of contention over what they were called.
Zebra crossings.
But no, it's a crosswalk.
Yeah.
So, okay, so crosswalks can be especially hard to navigate for visually impaired people because, you have many pedestrians and it's all about timing, and there's cars and bicycles and motorbikes, like you name it. It's a really busy place, and especially at larger intersections, it can be overwhelming. And I think sometimes this falls into the background for seeing people. They're not really paying attention to it that much, but some crosswalks emit sounds that are called accessible pedestrian signals. They communicate information about the walk and don't walk intervals at the crossing. That's more than just visual. And so there are many different sounds that they make based on cities or culture or country. So there isn't one common sound that these crosswalks make.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually also some contention about which sounds are more helpful in the visually impaired community, which we'll talk about later. But so we've collected a couple different sounds of crosswalks, starting with Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, so we'll start with one. We have two from Portland, but this is their
the first
from Portland, Oregon, in the States.
The city's.
So this one is known as the machine gun sound for the crosswalk, and it's actually been known to trigger people who have PTSD from their experiences in combat. And so Portland actually switched from the machine gun crosswalk sound to a recorded voice sound.
Which is this.
Sign was on. Southwest Lincoln. Walk sign is on the cross. Southwest Lincoln.
Yeah, so that one is actually a verbal cue of when to cross. But then, according to some members of the visually impaired community, the voice recording cue actually has a slower reaction time than the machine gun sound or chirping sounds, which you'll hear later on, because they wait to hear the entire voice recording and then walk. So it actually takes them longer to cross. But Portland for now is sticking with the voiceover one.
Mm-hmm. And then we're moving very far away from Portland. This one's from Hong Kong, and it sounds like this. Sounds almost like a ringtone.
Yeah, that one's a bit more neutral, I guess, more like a bell.
Yeah. This is the next one is unknown.
Yeah, I'm not actually. So I found these from
we didn't go to all these cities.
Sound effects website, and most of them were people add their own sounds that they're interested in, and they were all labeled except this one wasn't.
This was unknown.
If you know what city this is in, please let us know.
Let us know. We write it in the chat if you have a guess. Wait, no, this.
Oh, that's
sorry.
the
That
same
was
one.
the end of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is unknown. I'm recording.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, and the next one is coming from Tokyo, Japan, and it is known as the bird chirping sound. And the feedback about this is pretty interesting, but I'm going to wait until you hear it first. So just think about, how useful you think this would be.
You're on a crosswalk about to cross in Tokyo, and you hear this.
Okay, and then the next one is from Japan, not specifically just Tokyo, but let's play that before I go on. So that was more of the musical genre of crosswalk sounds.
Yeah, to me that one sounded like a washing machine tone after it's done with your laundry.
So what's interesting about the chirping, like the bird sound crosswalk noise, is they're actually in the US, in some cities, they're being phased out because the noise is really easily drowned out by traffic and wind. I don't know if you could tell on that recording, but it was, at first it's kind of hard to tell immediately. It doesn't cut through the ambient noise as much. But so they're being phased out mostly because visually impaired people reported that often they would mistake real bird chirps for the crosswalk sound, and they would walk into oncoming traffic. And obviously that's really dangerous and not awful. Okay. And then the reverse would happen. They would think that the crosswalk sound was just real birds and not cross immediately. So again, timing with the crosswalks is super important, and any sound that is kind of vague, like the bird chirping, while it may sound nicer, it is not actually helpful or accessible.
You think they would have thought that through with the bird sounds?
Yeah, and I think they actually analyzed it afterwards, and it was most similar to the northern cardinal, which is a really common bird, so at least in North America. So it was very confusing for some.
Yeah.
Oh, and then some of these APS buttons, so the buttons that you touch to cross that emit the sound recording as well, they actually have technology in them that's leveling the noise or recording the levels of noise throughout the city. So they raise the volume of the crosswalk recording, or they lower it based on noise levels to help users. But in Copenhagen, that is not the case, which you will see when we talk to Anne and play recordings from our experience in crossing streets. But just last note about these crosswalk noises, yes, they are extremely helpful to visually impaired people, but those aren't the only people they help. They help children, they help seeing people. It's just another alert to cross the street, and these extra accessible facets of urban design, they're important for all urban users, regardless of disabilities or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Bella's a certified crosswalk expert now. And we're going to shift gears in a bit and actually include Anne, who has been sitting patiently here for a while now, and talk about our experiences in Copenhagen walking across the city blindfolded. But first, another kind of quick music aside. There's one other blind musician who's totally changed the face of music across the world, and you're very familiar with him as well, I'm sure. His name's Stevie Wonder, and he has been blind since he was born in Michigan in 1950. One of his first recorded albums, actually at the age of 11, was a series of covers of Ray Charles songs. So you can hear Ray Charles's influence in his music. And Stevie Wonder is one of the most popular artists in the world, in large part because he was able to expand the sonic profile of soul and R&B music by introducing a wide variety of electronic sounds and instruments into his work. And what's interesting to me is that as a blind man, Stevie Wonder's conception of an experience of the city is likely very different from what it is for us. He walks around the city and thinks very different things, maybe, or experiences the world in a different way. But he's able to capture the feeling of being in a city, of working and walking through a city, much better than people with sight in a lot of ways. And so with that introduction, we're going to play one of his hits, Living for the City. All right. Welcome back to Noise Complaint. For the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to be joined by our lovely friend, Anne. Anne, would you like to introduce yourself again?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Anne. I'm from Luxembourg, and I'm also in the same course as Nelson and Bella, which is called the Four Cities Urban Studies course.
And why do you speak with such a beautiful Scottish accent?
Because I also lived 5 years in Scotland, so I've been a bit all over the place recently.
Also, Anne is the owner of the beautiful laugh recording we played last week. So
for those who are
here
listening,
she is in the flesh.
Yes, the legend. So we forced Anne to do something a bit strange with us last week. If you recall from last week, devoted listeners will remember that we mentioned soundscape in the word, and it was coined probably by Michael Southworth, who did this thesis in Boston where he brought his classmates around in wheelchairs and blindfolded them and asked them to talk about the sonic experience while blindfolded. So we thought we'd do a shorter version of that where we basically get a blindfold and asked Anne to walk across Hans Christian Andersen Boulevard, which is the maybe biggest street in downtown Copenhagen. So a lot of bikes, a lot of cars, maybe 6 lanes.
It was about one.
Yeah.
Around 1 in the afternoon. So it was a pretty busy time.
Yeah. So we'll play some audio just to set the scene. If you can imagine Radhusenplatz, and I didn't say that right, but basically the city hall square. And yeah, let's listen. So we have this scarf, and we're about to put it on Anne's head.
I was just gonna have Anne use.
Hi.
This, because it's like kind of thick, like you can't see through it. See?
Okay, or we're debating what to put, whether the mask for Corona.
I had a mask that was, pretty cute.
Yeah, or
and
she doesn't look
worked,
crazy.
But I wanted to use this scarf that I just paid
which I
€4
got
for.
3
That
euros.
look crazier.
And then I think you had a backpack or something, so there's a bit of
I'll hold
audio.
your stuff.
I can put my backpack on.
No, that's okay.
Are you sure? Like, it's really fucking heavy. Sorry, I probably shouldn't be swearing if I'm being
No,
recorded.
it's okay.
You can swear on our radio show.
No limit.
Yay!
Yeah, so if you didn't hear that, Anne gave Bella her backpack and then said it's really, what did you say it was?
It was really, really heavy.
Yeah. Well, that's not exactly what you said. But so then Bella's carrying her backpack. I'm recording Anne, who's blindfolded with a scarf.
And we're both walking next to her
Yeah,
while she
so she doesn't
moves
die.
through the street, but we're not like guiding her. We're just standing next to her while people stare at us strangely. Okay.
What do you hear? What do you hear?
I hear a lot of cars. I hear people walking past. That's a truck.
When the Uber just stopped.
It's it. I don't know why I'm lifting my head to here.
Moving your eyes.
Yeah, so I don't know, Anne, if you want to recreate for the
well,
so people who are viewing.
I was like, and I don't know why, but I could like feel my neck already
Yeah.
hurting.
You're like a
It
dog,
was
like a dog, like
really good. It
smelling.
was hurt
You were
so
like
much,
trying
yeah.
to see.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah. But did it feel? It must have felt weird to be in a blindfold.
Yeah, especially because you just hear the cars, and then you guys turned me as well around, so I just really didn't know anymore where I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, not sorry, but and then we approach the street, like we're protecting you, we're guiding you.
So you can hear the crosswalk noise now.
Yes,
This means
I
you can go. Oh, there's a bike approaching.
I'm not supposed to be there.
You can hear. This is the sound that means you
Yeah.
can walk, but I
Yeah.
don't think we'll make it across in time.
I don't think so. No, it's gone already.
There's a lot of bikes. Watch out.
Shift
So
to your
the
left.
bikes are like-
Slide to your left. Slide to the left.
Fast.
Slide to the left. Slide to the left again. Keep going.
Yeah, so then we're ready to go at the crosswalk, about to cross Hans Christian Andersen, and you can hear us talking about the beeping. So what were we doing?
Well, I was just explaining to Anne what the different noises meant, like the speeds. It's slower when you're supposed to be waiting.
The
and
beeping is.
Yeah, the beeping is slower when you're supposed to be waiting, and then it speeds up when you're supposed to cross. And it was beeping quickly, so it meant we should go. But I knew that Anne wouldn't be able to cross in time because we had approached it like in the middle of the fast beeping. So that's another issue. Just with timing is really hard when you're not seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did it feel being so like you were right up against the cars? Like how did that feel?
Yeah,
Like?
it was so scary, and especially when you guys were like, "Oh, watch cyclists," and I know that crossing very well from cycling myself, and I know people just love to like skip that red light.
Yeah,
so
I think you
was
even
very
say
scared.
that. You say that in this next clip here.
How you feeling?
I might actually be more worried about the cyclists than about the car drivers, because car drivers usually definitely stop at red, whereas I know the cyclists here usually they just fly through.
Would you?
Oh, is that we're going?
Yeah.
Would I what?
So we're gonna try to make it
You're
across.
okay. You gotta walk a little
in
faster.
Time. Yeah, 'cause you wanna
In time? Oh my god, wow. This is so weird.
Keep going.
Am I walking that much slower than the usual?
Yeah.
I probably am.
You're going a little diagonal.
So, so we're crossing the street, right?
Yeah.
And you weren't going in a straight line.
Yeah, which is so weird because I totally thought I was, and then
Yeah.
you were trying to correct
Normally,
me.
you're good. You're pretty good at walking straight.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah, no, I totally lost that ability. It was very, very strange.
Yeah. And then we reached there's this island in between the one lane of traffic and another, and so I think this is from that when we reached the island.
And listen,
What do you hear?
what do you hear?
Nothing. Oh, now it's faster again.
Yep.
So are we going?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's the sound for going.
This one is much fainter than the other one.
Yeah.
Because I think it actually only comes from that one, the noise. It's not coming from this side.
We'll investigate after.
Well, that's rubbish, isn't it? Ooh, maybe my... Ooh! Did we just go over the cycle lane?
So explain what happened there, Anne.
Yeah, so Bella and Nelson were nice enough not to tell me that there is a ramp. So I just barged into this ramp, which really, if I had a look at it afterwards, it really wasn't a big thing. But if you don't know that ramp's coming, you're generally just tripping over it. So yeah.
Yeah. And then we have about 50 seconds of some final thoughts after you've reached the edge or the end of the street.
Oh, you made it!
Yeah, you made it across.
I can't believe
Do you
this.
think that's I don't know, was it more of an obstacle than you anticipated?
Yeah, no, this is petrifying. It literally feels like I'm so close to the cars, so I don't want to move at all. But I guess if you're really blind, you just really have to trust those bubbles on the pavement.
But it's hard to though because they're not always in the same place
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and then sometimes they do these weird corners and everything, so.
And the sound is really hard.
Well, it's a huge flaw that it's not coming from this side as well. It literally is only coming from that side of the street.
Yeah, no, it's totally weird because when you were oh, the sound's on again, and I'm is it? Because I only could hear cars, really.
So, can I just ask you, have in the last few days since we did this sort of pseudoscientific test, how have you approached sidewalks and crossings differently?
I mean, because I've mainly been cycling, I've really been more respectful about
That's good.
whether I'm crossing a red light or not. And yeah, I've been trying to actually listen, or does this crosswalk have an actual noise on when can I hear it and on which side can I hear it, and yeah, just try and watch out for people in a nicer way instead of just barging through.
And I mean, I know in the recordings we played of crosswalks earlier, obviously the sound was much more noticeable, but then in the recording of you crossing, the sound wasn't super helpful. It seemed I don't know if you just want to reflect on what you thought of how accessible it really was.
Yeah, I mean, when we were in the middle of the road on that island, and you really have cars on one side passing one way and on the other side passing the other way, and there's huge trucks I could hear and everything, and that car noise was just so much louder. So I was really trying to concentrate and find this noise to tell me on that when I was standing on that road island that I can cross the second part, but I really just lost the sound, and it was really concerning. Although I know the two of you were there next to me, I was why can I not hear this? Why is this not here to help me? And I think that must be really stressful for people who actually have an impairment.
Yeah, who don't have two people with them.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have to shift to the next guinea pig that we had do this blindfold test. So we also brought another classmate of ours, Brian, who's maybe listening. He's from Ireland, and he's a great guy, and he was kind enough to come to the square after Anne and go through this same experience of crossing the boulevard. So we'll take you back to the square. You ready?
Yes, sir.
I shall.
Let's start over here, though. Start in the same place. Yeah. So just quickly, we spin him around again, and we got him to the crosswalk, and then we ask him what he hears.
I hear the beeping noise of the it's time to go. Here we go. So this is me, yeah? Yeah. So people are going to be coming at me, and I'm not going to move, and they're going to move around me because they'll hopefully notice that I can't see.
So you're going a bit diagonal.
Alright, so
Other way.
But so don't go diagonal.
Alright, shall I speed up?
No, you're all right.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
I hear the other people now, so they better not bump into me. Am I still going straight, yeah?
What do you think based on the noises?
Can
you hear the crosswalk anymore or no?
No. I can't hear shit.
But you feel all right.
I don't like crossing roads at the best of times, you know. And now I can't see. Thanks for the heads up, guys.
We didn't give Anne the heads up either.
Yeah, that's the point.
Am I
You're done.
I know there's an island in the middle. I was like, there's no way I didn't trip on that island.
So yeah, he crossed it really fast.
Yeah, like I think for you, how did you feel about speed? Because Brian, with him, speed wasn't an issue, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I felt so insecure, and I know I also had like my hands out in the front, and I just really didn't like trust the situation, and I was just like, I don't know where I'm going, and well, I actually felt like I was going much faster, but I clearly wasn't. And then yeah, like with Brian, I was actually so impressed that he just barged through the crosswalk, like he can still
ridiculous.
see. But yeah, especially for me, the cars were like really so loud, and I felt like they were right next to me, although I was apparently quite far away from them. So
And the thing is, Brian did it so fast that he wanted to cross another street. So,
To the left. Now, do you feel the?
This thing?
yeah.
So this is the crosswalk. These bumps.
This thing here?
Yeah.
So this is a road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Catch
Do
it
you,
on quick.
do you,
This box actually isn't even making a noise.
Yeah.
but you can't hear that. You can't hear the beeping, can you?
No.
Well, Anne said she can only hear when she puts her ear up to it.
Yeah.
I can't hear it. I'd like to say yes, as
No, that's okay.
the person who can't see, but as it happens, I can't. Alright. Alright, what's going on?
You're on the street now.
Am I walking the right way?
Are you going left to go left a little bit? Left a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, we got to pick up the pace a bit.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's red, so
Okay.
keep going, keep going.
Still going,
keep
still
a
going,
bit
still going,
faster.
still going, still going.
Okay, watch out, watch out, watch out. Slow down there.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Okay.
And now
But
it's-
yeah, so see, it's this. You have to go across that one faster.
Now you have less time.
Yeah, it's very disconcerting,
Halfway
isn't
through,
it?
we were at the red.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, when you were telling me I had to walk faster there, and then at the start, because I was already kind of at the start, like very much so not doing the right thing. So, that was a little bit more hectic, I'd say. The
Yeah.
other one was fine, and
Yeah?
people, it's such a, I don't know, because it's the main thoroughfare and there's a lot of time, and there's an island. You're kind of like,
Yeah.
okay,
You felt safe.
yeah. And then there's also the other opportunity that if she really gets fucked up, I'd be like, take my hand.
Yeah,
Take
you have
take
people
my
with
strong
you.
hand, child.
But imagine doing that by yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, without anyone to be like, oh. to the
Yeah,
left, to
it's
the
not
right.
it's not very conducive to comfort or security if you can't see.
Right, and if you couldn't hear it, like we're there to tell you when to cross. But
Yeah.
Somebody who doesn't have someone seeing,
Uh,
if they can't hear it, they wouldn't know.
Yeah, especially because the beeper
Yeah.
at the side of the thing isn't there. Like you want to have very thin soles.
Yeah, it's true. The
To,
feet are important.
Yeah, if you've got bad circulation or something, you're kind of in trouble.
Big thanks to Brian. He's great to do that for us, and we thank him very much.
Yeah. What I was saying was that, while this show is centered around sound, as visually impaired people, they experience more senses than just sound. So I wanted to ask Anne what she experienced with touch and texture as well.
yeah. So I mean, there's meant to be those like that kind of like concrete with those bubbles at the front of a street, so like a visually impaired person knows that it's about to cross the street. And it was very confusing because before that there you have like cobblestones. And as kind of Brian also mentioned, if you have fixed soles, like you can't tell the difference between a cobblestone and between that like those bubbles you're meant to be actually feeling. And again, you were kind of like hitting the floor with your foot like a crazy person, trying to figure out whether it's cobblestones or whether it's actually like that sign that you can cross, and or that you can like stay here before you're crossing. So yeah, it's a sense like when you see, you don't think about it because you can clearly see the difference. But I think you really have to get used to understanding these differences with your feet.
Yeah, and I think that's something that urban designers and planners take for granted, because they're like, oh yeah, there's a difference visually between the cobblestones and the bubbles. But when you're feeling, I feel like that might not be something they tested out with a visually impaired person, because, as you can tell from the recordings, all of the pedestrian markers that were supposed to enhance accessibility didn't really help either Anne or Brian.
Yeah, and it's likely that you'd be training your feet, training your other senses if you were growing up visually impaired, and so we obviously don't have the full picture here. But still, I think city designers, crosswalk designers, can be more, I think, at least open to hearing about the experiences of this community.
Yeah, and I mean, just in general, like accessible cities that focus on pedestrians, again, that's beneficial to everybody. And accessibility should be something that's considered in the beginning of a design phase, because, better design incorporates more people and more participation. And I think we would all benefit from a city that has larger crosswalks, is more focused on the pedestrian and less about cars and visuals.
Yeah, I 100% I agree. Bella and I also did this experiment. We don't have time to play audio from our crossing, but suffice it to say that I ran into Bella on the way. Also ran into a man. It was not
I bumped into pedestrians as well. Like people weren't really being accommodating.
No.
That woman had no mercy. Like she was barging into you guys. Like
But yeah, I mean, all kind of kidding aside, I think it was a very illuminating experience for the both of us, or for all four of us with Brian. And I think for me, obviously these urban design concerns are very important and take priority in terms of accessibility and inclusivity. But I also started to appreciate the ways in which visually impaired individuals have to learn to be open and kind of, just listening to the city and to its complex sonic textures. And obviously it's primarily a matter of survival first and foremost. But in interviews that I've read this week, it's interesting how some blind people actually frame the process of learning to hear the city as, in a way, empowering. When they walk through the city, visually impaired individuals go through a much more heightened multi-sensory experience. So they work with what they can hear and touch and smell, unlike the rest of us who focus almost exclusively on what we see. So that was, I think, a very important takeaway for me, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think it's just about expanding the way we understand the urban, and that definition changes based on who you are and what obstacles you face. And we can all be a little more accommodating and empathetic and practice these traits when we try to read the texts of a city.
So with that, again, I think we should thank Anne for being
thank
here.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's really fun.
Thanks to Brian again as well, and thanks to all of you guys for listening.
Yeah. Next week, we don't necessarily have a specific theme, but we are going to be interviewing one of our professors who has done a radio show about sound in the city before. So who knows?
He's got a lot of
stories.
stories. His name's Henrik. listeners might know him well. So get excited for that. Same time next Sunday at 5
and
p.m.
Please send us recommendations of topics you're interested in, songs you want to hear, thoughts you have. You can leave it in the comments, but we also have an email, which
it's noisecomplaint.show@gmail.com. That's noisecomplaint.show@gmail.com.
And we haven't gotten an email yet.
Please
so you guys
email
are
us. We're really lonely. But also subscribe to this page, we're going to leave you with a cover by Jose Feliciano, another blind musician from Puerto Rico. You've heard him sing the mega hit Feliz Navidad, of course. But today we're going to play, it's not Christmas yet, so we're going to play a cover of California Dreamin'. And clearly from the music side of this, I just want to leave it with the idea that physical disabilities clearly don't limit creativity. And I think that's something we all know very well. So again, this was Noise Complaint.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.